This session is going to be on Chapter 2, identifying the 3 core zones. In the history of Wright balance, Dr. Frank Job's biomechanics lab, we had our subjects go to their normal stance width, and we measured it, and we checked their balance, and we had them go 2 inches wider and 2 inches narrower. Out of all of that, plus numerous other measurements, from carrying angle to body width, shoulder width, shoe size, all of those variables were integrated. And out of that, this is the study was done in early 2000s. So now when you see these 9 core zones on the horizontal plane, this evolved from 2 zones to 3 zones, the zones being red, black, and blue. And then we subdivided into 3 subregions in each, as you can see. So the red is upper, black is mid, and blue is lower. We use these for a number of years and identified. So when you look from behind, we're looking at what's called the axial or transverse plane here. So as we evolved more, and this is relatively recent considering the research, this is in the last 2 years, where we identified 5 total subregions in each of those zones. Now, the color coding, as you go through this, color coding is critical. On the vinyl strips you received, you'll see that number 1 where I'm looking at upper zone, you can look at any one of these zones, but the red, the first number on red is subregion 1. The second number on red, as you get wider, we're going from 0 and wider. Second number is red 2, red 3, red 4, red 5. And instead of using the inches as they appear on that vinyl strip, we have Wright balance professionals all over the world. So we're going to a number system because metrics are used in Europe and Asia. The metric system, we want to be able to communicate comfortably worldwide. So as we go through this, and I refer to red 1, and I'm looking at from 0 point, the first red stance width on your vinyl strip, and black 1, and so on and so forth. And the lower core has an identical 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the interesting thing is, as we go through these zones, we see changes in carrying angle. We see changes in balance, heel to toe balance, and we're able to change carrying angle and balance quite simply, just by doing the Wright Balance Express. So we see front and back on the horizontal plane. And while we were still in the, and this is the chapter I'm going through, you received a copy. This is a real important video because this came with the 9 subregions. Now it's present in the 15. In the past, we've pretty much looked primarily at the horizontal plane, the transverse or the axial plane, because we saw changes in hip rotation in all of those. And this was done by our graphic artist, Tom. He did a beautiful job on. You can see the subregions are separated front to back. And the red zone here is the red zone, as you'll see it separated, is the anterior. Black zone is the interior. And the blue zone is the posterior. But what you want to understand is, as we go through this, you can see my hand and the measurements on it. I'm going to change cameras for you so you'll be able to see it a little bit better. So if you look at my hand, you'll notice as we do this, I've taken off my ring, but if you look at my hand, you'll see the red, which is the upper core, matches what you just saw in the upper core zone. This is an important match, and I'll explain that to you as we go. Upper core balance is going to be on the balls of the feet, very much forward. The mid core, which is the black zone you just saw, is just behind the balls of the feet, forward of the center of the arches. And then we have the blue zone, which is the lower core. So the black zone is the middle knuckle. The blue zone is my second pad up. These are going to be very important, as I said, as we move forward. So if you look at, I have done the Right Balance Express today in my mid-core. And as you'll see, as we move forward, you're going to be able to change zones from upper to middle to lower once you're doing the Right Balance Express. But after you've done the Right Balance Express and you go into a setup, you'll notice that when I show you my carrying angle, notice that it's parallel to my thighs. A very important concept. Now I'm going to disrupt my core here in just a moment and show you the changes. But before I do, I have on the floor an alignment stick. You want to get an alignment stick. Ones I get come from Home Depot here in the US. The alignment stick, and you want to wear a very thin soled shoe because you're going to use it to find your balance. So as I was showing you my carrying angle, when I'm square, the angle is the same as my carrying angle on both sides. We'll take a look at that again in a moment. So when I stand on this alignment stick, just behind the balls of the feet, forward to the center of the arches, and I add knee flex, I can find my balance precisely. So how do I know I'm in balance? Because I'm going to have no shoulder restriction in my rotation to the right, or I should say in the backswing, back in the through swing. Now, if I am out of balance, and what I've done is I've moved back over the center of my arches. So if I'm out of balance here and I rotate, I have a restriction in rotation in the back and a restriction in rotation through. Once again, if I'm in balance, I'll have maximum rotation back and through. So finding balance at a dress, anything you're doing is important. I'm going to move my trail foot. I'm going to go back into a upper core over the balls of my feet with my trail foot, and I'm still going to have maximum rotation in the backswing. As I turn through, I'm stuck. So left to right balance is critical when you're looking at maximum rotation. Now I'm going to disrupt my core. Well, before I do, let me just show you that I have, if I take a step forward here, you'll notice how square my hips stay. These are measurements that are going to be important for you moving forward. Notice how square my hips stay. And if I stand tall, my hips are square. If I had knee flex, my hips are square. One of the things we looked at in one of our prior sessions was how to measure rotation of the hips in particular on various planes of motion. So I want you to, if you would please just stand up, rest your elbows on your chest wall, and just let your arms drop and lean back. And what you should be seeing, or what you will see, likely is one hand is higher than the other. So if I rotate my hips a little bit to my left, you'll notice my right hand just rose. It just came up. And if I rotate my hips the other way, so it's a measure of the rotational transverse plane in that position. So if I take a step forward here, my hands are square. If I had rotation, I'd have a lower left hand here or right hand, whatever. So that measurement is going to become very important for you moving forward, because we're going to be looking at using that. You get out of bed in the morning, you'll drop your hands and look to see one hand higher than the other. It'll tell you a lot about your body, especially as we get more and more into planes of motion. Now, I'm going to disrupt my core. And by disrupting my core, you'll see I have on this bat, I have blue, black, and red. Okay, this is my handle size. Everybody is different. So when you get these bats, you'll have a black strip of tape, you'll have a red strip of tape, and you'll have a blue strip of tape. So what you're going to do, your students, you're probably only going to be using one color, one state. So we'll take a look at how you're going to determine that in just a moment. So when you do the express, you want the colors to match. So if you have a mismatch or you do the exercise incorrectly, you're going to totally disrupt the core. Disrupting the core is not difficult to do, especially when you're looking at handle size. So I'm going to go to I'm going to use a black, and I'm going to go to a blue number, and I'm going to do the express. Now, as I do this, all I'm doing is the right balance express with mismatched colors. Okay, so I've disrupted my core. Let's take a look at what that did. First of all, you're going to find that the carrying angle is critical in the golf swing. So I add knee flex. You'll notice that my right arm here is well outside my right thigh. I just disrupted. If I stand tall, you'll notice how much my hips rotate. Now, when you see rotation of the hips, I have heard and I've seen that when you're working with someone who is an upper core player, they're going to have very shallow carrying angle. Their carrying angle is going to be, and it's not as easy to identify the upper core player when you're just using one measure. And we have multiple ways of measuring this. This is a great way to measure. So if I stand tall and rotate, you'll notice when I drop my arms here, you can see how much higher my right hand is than my left, which means my hips are rotated to my left. So when you have an upper core player, you may see a very, very little difference here. Okay. What we're looking at now, excuse this segue, is that this measure is really a measure of a different plane of motion. You'll notice that my right shoulder dropped and my right hip is elevated. I believe this measurement in this position is measuring this plane of motion. This is a coronal or frontal plane. We'll get to that. But right now, you want to make sure when you're testing, all you're doing is letting the hands drop. And you'll see my right hand is higher. Even though my hips may look square there, what you're getting is a measure of my rotational plane. If I take a step forward now, my hips actually rotate to the right. If I take a step back from this position, you can see the difference in how my hands hang. Now, this measurement, you have to keep the elbows on the chest wall, have to be totally relaxed. You can't be out here and find it. So you've got to be totally relaxed to find it. So what do we do now? What you're going to do is you want to identify what the dominant subregion, what the dominant zone is, and then you're going to identify what the dominant subregion is. So in the past, there have been a couple of things. I had emails and is this a parlor trick? No, it's not a parlor trick. We use the OK sign. All that is doing is putting pressure on a fingertip. Okay. And then when I apply pressure on one of these three positions of my power spots, you'll see the core change accordingly. So instead of applying pressure to that fingertip, all I'm going to do is put a piece of tape around that fingertip. Now you'll notice that my hips are still rotated here. And if I do this, let my stand tall, relax, drop the shoulders, elbows on the chest wall, and just let them drop. But let them bounce. That's telling you you're totally relaxed. And you'll see that my right hand is higher, indicating that my hips are rotated to the left. Now, to test this, remember I have three colors on my hand. I have red, which is upper core. I have black, which is mid core. And notice the position. The red is on the first pad up. The black is on the first knuckle. And the blue is on the second pad. Okay, so three positions. So as I stand here, and if I apply pressure to the red, which is the first pad, I add knee flex, my hips are still rotated. If I apply pressure to the first knuckle up and I add knee flex, my hips are still rotated. If I apply pressure to the blue, you see what just happened to my hips? They squared up, which is telling you that my core zone is blue. My core zone is lower core. So that is a really an important observation, because it's going to tell you how I'm going to use the ground, how I'm going to grip the club, what my posture should be, and how my sequence and motion should be in the backswing. So every one of these core zones is different, really, as related to grip. My grip will always have to cross that blue spot in that middle finger, and it is the middle finger where the grip will cross in both my left and in my right hand. We'll reverse that. That's left and right. Yeah, I do understand the difference. So my hips are rotated. Apply pressure to the red, no change. Apply pressure to the black, no change. Apply pressure to the blue, and my hips rotate. Now, if you're giving a lesson to a student who says why does that work? Well, I have a chapter for you down the road on propagation of force. This research was done, it comes out of tensegrity, if you're familiar with that concept. It was done by a cellular biologist, physician, whose name is Don Ingber. Dr. Ingber is with the Wyss Institute. He founded it in the early 2000s. As an individual, they have over 300 to 400 engineers, physicians, all disciplines together. Have done a remarkable job. But what his staff did in about 2003-04, they were able to observe when you apply pressure to a focal point of a cell, they were able to observe the propagation of force through that cell. So he called it, one of them called it action at a distance. Another referred to it as mechanotransduction. But anyway, mechanical force applied to a part of the body produces changes. And that's all this is, that's the microcosm. And I believe this is the macrocosm. Why? Well, there are many, many different theories, and no one really understands why. When you dive into the literature, nobody really understands it. if you look at fascia, fascia envelops absolutely everything in our body, from a capillary to an organ. So the fascia process, applying pressure here and then to my lower core power spot, does that impact it? Well, maybe. We're not sure whether it's fascia. We don't know what it is. But I'll have a chapter for you can give to your students if they are interested. If you're giving me a lesson, I'm going to want to understand why. I've heard this referred to as a parlor trick. It is not. There's a very strong scientific base for it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply, before I do that, let's determine now. I have five subregions in my lower core. So I'm going to go to the first subregion. I haven't taped anything. So I only have tape on my nail on my left hand, index finger. And it does not matter what finger you use when you're doing this. So you'll see I'm on the blue 1. I have rotation. If I go to blue 2, all of a sudden I square up. So I've identified that I'm in the lower core, blue zone, lower core, and I am on blue 2. That is my dominant zone. And we'll talk in a moment about why that's so important. If I go to blue 3, I rotate. If I go to blue 4, I rotate. If I go to blue 5, I rotate. If I get back to blue 2, the second number on the vinyl strip and the stance widths, now I am absolutely squared. So that tells me a lot. It's going to tell me that my carrying angle is going to be, I'll measure the carrying angle here. But if I'm ready to go play, and this is true of me, my carrying angle is 152 degrees. And that 152 degrees, let me what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply tape to that third blue on my middle finger. I'm going to apply tape there. And what that tape is going to do, it's going to square me in all stance widths. No matter where I go here, I am square. However, if I take a step forward, I'm rotated. Take a step back, I'm rotated. And you'll still notice that my right shoulder is lower and my right hip is higher. So all it's changing is my rotational plane. Obviously, rotational plane in all sports, no matter what, is imperative. As we talk about golf, rotational plane becomes intimately involved in just about everything, as does the carrying angle. So I know, for example, now my carrying angle still is different. But if I measure on both sides, if I go to 152 with this digital protractor, and by the way, when we started the session today, I told you I was in the mid-core because you can move your core zones. You will always default. When I disrupt my core, I will always go back to the lower core and I will always go to blue 2. Done this for years. So if you put the digital protractor down the middle of my forearm and I look at that bubble, this bubble is telling me that this is 90 degrees. I am 152. And the other way we can tell is if I hold this, so the bubble's centered here, I'll have maximum rotation at 152. If I change this angle, this is 152, but if I change this angle to less, I can't rotate. If I change it to more, I'm stuck in my rotation. So 152, as we delve into this more and more, you'll see how important the carrying angle is. And it is, I'm not going to show you the other way because it gets into grip style, complementary versus butterfly, and I was just confused for the moment. But we can also determine how you should grip the club out of these measurements. So 152, I'm good. Now, as I showed you, step forward and rotate, step back, I'm going to rotate. So this is only going to create changes in my rotational plane. So when we go through this content, now and in the future, proof of concept is absolutely crucial. We don't, right balance, unless we have proof of concept, we don't teach it. We'll explore it. We'll cite it as an observation, but you're going to see that the planes of motion, whether we're talking about the rotational plane, we talked about this as the coronal and how we'll correct all of that. When the trail hip is higher to address, we are able to correct everything. But everything right balance does is about balance. So, and if we don't have proof of concept, we do not move forward. So as you're teaching, most golf professionals, myself included, by the way, as a low core player, Hogan was my model. And I taught, get those arms up on the chest wall. I think page 39, 49, whatever in Hogan's book, shows his arms laced together here. I taught that for years. Only about 10% of the male population is a low core player. Only about 10%. You'll find for example, if you look at athletes who need a lot of external shoulder rotation, quarterback pitchers, likely going to be a low core. Other athletes, runners, are likely going to be upper core. And when you get to the mid core, we're going to see a lot of similarities to upper and lower, but they're in it on their own. As you heard me say, the majority of your tour winners are mid core. Should you move? Probably not. Right balance is about creating mobility where you can tap into existing strength, but it's not a good idea to move. So when the research was done, and this is worldwide, when the research is done, about 60% of players are upper core measured. We're talking combining men and women. We go to Greg Leach in Germany, Stuttgart, Germany, one of our right balance professionals. Greg says that a lot of the students he teaches are big in skiing and soccer, lower core sports. You may be genetically predisposed to be upper, middle, or lower, but something called epigenetics, meaning you can go through training that will change that. So training can, I believe, we don't have evidence of this, but I believe training will change core zone. We can voluntarily change core zone. We can move you to those core zones and we can show you how to strengthen and gain maximum power in each of those. But that's for another time. So upper core is about 60%. Mid core is about 30% of individuals, and lower core is about 10. Now, when you read about carrying angle, physiological valgus of the elbow, you read about carrying angle, you're going to see that angle is measured online, goes up.
He's diverted again. He just can't do it.
Please mute your microphone.
Can't stay on topic.
Please mute your microphone. And up the upper arm is how it is measured. Forearm to upper arm is how it is measured. In the biomechanics lab, sometimes this is a bit serendipitous, and it was. I began to measure 90 degrees to the ground. And as you'll see, that is a measure that is a constant. If you look up carrying angle online, it will tell you that women have the greatest carrying angle and men the most shallow. Well, most women are mid and lower core. So as we go through the core zone, you're going to find the biggest carrying angle is going to be in your lower core and your shallow is in the upper core. So we're going to close the education session for now. Everything I discussed, we're going to go into in great detail. For example, the carrying angle, we have a chapter on the power of angles. On grip, we have a chapter on grip. We have a chapter on the core zones and measurement of the core zones. So this is your introduction to upper, middle, and lower, and the color coding and how important that is, and how we're going to go in next session. We'll be into the measurement. We'll have the measurement online for you, how to do these measurements and what they mean and why.